Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I'm excited to read to you from Grace Harlowe's junior year at high school, which was written by a woman named Josephine Chase, who wrote under the pseudonym Jessie Graham Flower. Chapter 10, Julia Performs a Sacred Duty. "What have we ever done that we should be so neglected?" said David Nesbitt, swinging himself from his motorcycle and landing squarely in front of Grace Harlowe and Anne Pearson while they were out walking one afternoon. "Why, David Nesbitt, how can you make such statements?" replied Grace, looking at the young man in mock disapproval. "You know perfectly well that you've been shut up in your old laboratory all fall. We have scarcely seen you since the walking party. You have even given football the go-by, and I'm so sorry, for you were a star player last year." "I see you have discovered the secrets of my past life," replied David, laughing. "That's what comes of having a sister who belongs to a sorority. However, you folks are equally guilty. You've all gone mad over your sorority and left Hippie and Reddy and me to wander about Oakdale like lost souls. I hear you've adopted a girl, too. Reddy is horribly jealous of her. He says Jessica won't look at him anymore." "Reddy is laboring under a false impression," said Anne. "He is head over heels in football practice and has forgotten he ever knew Jessica. As for Hippie, Nora says that he's studying night and day and that he is actually wearing himself away by burning midnight oil." "Yes, Hippie is studying some this year," replied David. "You see, this is our senior year, and we are going to enter the same college next year if all goes well. You know Hippie never bothered himself much about study, just managed to scrape through, but now he'll have to hustle if he gets through with high school this year, and he's wide awake to that fact. Under those circumstances, Hippie is forgiven, but not you and Reddy," said Grace severely. "You'll have to have better excuses than football and experiments." "I'll tell you what we'll do to square ourselves," said David, smiling. "We'll take you girls to the football game next Thursday. It's Thanksgiving Day, you know, and Oakdale is going to play Georgetown College. Reddy's on the team, but Hippie and I will do the honors." "Fine," replied Grace. "But are you willing to burden yourselves with some extra girls? You see, it's this way. One of the things that our sorority has pledged itself to do this year is to look up the stray girls in high school and see that they are not lonely and homesick during holiday seasons. I used to know nearly all the girls in school, but ever so many new ones have crept in, and some of them have come here from quite a distance on account of the excellence of our high school. After we adopted Mabel Allison, we began looking about us for other fish to fry, and found out about these girls. So every girl in the sorority has invited one or more of these lonely ones for Thanksgiving Day. They are to come in the morning and stay until the lights go out, which will be late, for Mother has consented to let me have a party, and all those new girls are to be the guests of honor. Mrs. Gray is in it, too. She insists on having Anne with her on Thanksgiving, although Anne had invited 2 girls to her house," continued Grace. "Mrs. Gray had planned a party for us, but when we told her what we were about to do, she gave up her party and agreed to go to mine instead, on condition that Anne's family, plus Anne's 2 guests, should have dinner with her." "Bless her dear heart," said David. "She was always thinking of the pleasure of others. Now about the football game. Bring your girls along, and I'll do my best to give them a good time, although I'm generally anything but a success with new girls. However, Hippie makes up for what I lack. He can entertain a regiment of them, and not even exert himself. Now, I must leave you, for I have a very important engagement at home. In the laboratory, I suppose," said Anne teasingly. "Just so," replied David. "Goodbye, girls. Let me know how many tickets you want for the game." He raised his cap, mounted his machine, and was off down the street. "It will seem good to have a frolic with the boys again, won't it?" said Grace to Anne as they strolled along. "We do seem to be getting awfully serious and settled of late," replied Anne. "Why, this sorority business has taken up all our spare time lately. We've had so many special meetings." "I know it," replied Grace, "but after Thanksgiving, we'll only meet once in 2 weeks, for I must get my basketball team in shape, and you see all the members belong to the society." "You ought to do extra good work this year," observed Anne, "for the team is absolutely harmonious. Last season seems like a dream to me now." "It was real enough then," replied Grace grimly. "I have forgiven long ago. But I have not forgotten the way some of those girls performed last year. It was remarkable that things ever straightened themselves. The clouds looked black for a while, didn't they?" Anne pressed Grace's hand by way of answer. The sophomore year had been crowded with many trials, some of them positive school tragedies, in which Anne and Grace had been the principal actors. "What are you two mooning over?" asked a gay voice, and the two girls turned with a start to find Julia Crosby grinning cheerfully at them. "Oh, Julia, how glad I am to see you at close range!" exclaimed Grace. "Admiring you from a distance isn't a bit satisfactory." "Business, children, business," said Julia briskly. "That's the only thing that keeps me from your side. The duties of the class president are many and irksome. At the present moment I've a duty on hand that I don't in the least relish, and I want your august assistance. Will you promise to help before I tell you?" "Why, of course," answered Grace and Anne in the same breath. "What is it you want us to do?" "Well, it seems that some of your juniors are still in need of discipline. You remember the hatchet that we buried last year with such pomp and ceremony?" "Yes, yes," was the answer. "This morning I heard certain girls planning to go out to the omnibus house after school tomorrow and dig up the poor hatchet and flaunt it in the seniors' faces the day of the opening basketball game, simply to rattle us, just as though it wouldn't upset your team as much as ours. It's an idiotic trick, at any rate, and anything but funny. Now I propose to take 4 of our class, and you must select 4 of yours. We'll hustle out there the minute school is over tomorrow, and be ready to receive the marauders when they arrive. Select your girls, but don't tell them what you want, or they may tell someone about it beforehand." "Well, of all impudence!" exclaimed Anne. "Who are the girls, Julia? Are you sure they're juniors?" "The 2 I heard talking are juniors. I don't know who else is in it. They'll be very much astonished to find us waiting at the church, omnibus house, I mean," said Julia. "And I imagine they'll feel rather silly, too." "Tell us who they are, Julia," said Grace. We don't want to go into this blindfolded." "Wait and see," replied Julia tantalizingly. "Then you'll feel more indignant and can help my cause along all the better. I give you my word that the girls I overheard talking are not particular friends of yours. You aren't going to back out, are you, and leave me without proper support?" "Of course not," laughed Grace. "Don't worry, we'll support you, only you must agree to do all the talking." "I shall endeavor to overcome their insane freshness with a few well-chosen words," Julia promised. Be sure and be on hand early." Grace chose Anne, Nora, Jessica, and Mary and Barber, the latter 3 being considerably mystified at her request, but nevertheless agreeing to be on hand when school closed. They were met at the gate by Julia and 4 other seniors, and the whole party set out for the omnibus house without delay. Grace walked with Julia, and the 2 girls found plenty to say to each other during the walk. Julia was studying hard, she told Grace. She wanted to enter Smith next year. "I don't know where I shall go after I finish high school," said Grace. Ethel Post wants me to go to Wellesley. She'll be a junior when I'm a freshman. You know, she was graduated from high school last June, and she could help me a lot in getting used to college. But I don't know whether I should like Wellesley. I shall not try to decide where I want to go for a while yet." "Wherever we are, we'll write and always be friends," said Julia, and Grace warmly acquiesced. As they neared the old omnibus house, they could see no one about. "We're early!" exclaimed Julia. "The enemy has not arrived. Thank goodness. It's not too cold today, or we might have a chilly vigil. Now, listen, all ye faithful, while I set forth the object of this walk." She thereupon related what Grace and Anne already knew. "What a shame!" cried Mary and Barber. "It isn't the hatchet we care for, it's the principle of the thing. Give them what they deserve, Julia." "Never fear," replied Julia. "I'll effectually attend to their case. Now, we'd better dodge around the corner and keep out of sight until they get here. Then we'll swoop down upon them unawares." The avengers hurriedly concealed themselves at the side of the old house, where they could not be seen by an approaching party. They had not waited long before they heard voices. "They're coming," whispered Julia. "There are 8 of them. Form in line, and when they get nicely started, we'll circle about them and hem them in. I'll give you the signal." The girls waited in silence. "They have trowels," Julia informed them from time to time. "They have a spade. They've begun to dig, and they are having their own troubles, for the ground is hard. All ready?" March! Softly, the procession approached the spot where the marauders were energetically digging. Grace gave a little gasp and, reaching back, caught Anne's hand. The girl using the spade was Eleanor. "Now I'm in for it," groaned Grace. "She is down on me now, and she'll be sure to think I organized the whole thing." For an instant, Grace regretted making the promise to Julia before learning the situation. Then, holding her head a trifle more erect, she decided to make the best of her unfortunate predicament. "It isn't Julia's fault," she thought. "She probably knows nothing about our acquaintance with Eleanor. Besides, Eleanor has no business to play such tricks. Edna Wright must have told her all about last year." Her reflections were cut short, for one of the girls glanced up from her digging with a sudden exclamation, which drew all eyes toward Julia and her party. "Well, little folks," said Julia in mock surprise, "what sort of a party is this? Are you making mud pies, or are you pretending you are at the seashore?" At Julia's first words, Eleanor dropped the small spade she held and straightened up, the picture of defiance. Her glance traveled from girl to girl, and she curled her lip contemptuously as her eye rested on Grace and Anne. The other diggers looked sheepishly at Julia, who stood eyeing them in a way that made them feel too foolish for anything, as one of them afterwards expressed it. "Why don't you answer me, little girls?" asked Julia. "Has the kitty stolen your tongue?" This was too much for Eleanor. "How dare you speak to us in that manner, and treat us as though we were children?" she burst forth. "What business is it of yours why we are here? Do you own this property?" "Mercy, no," replied Julia composedly. "Do you?" "No," replied Eleanor a trifle less rudely, "but we have as much right here as you have." "Granted," replied Julia calmly. "However, there is this difference. You are here to make mischief, and we are here to prevent it, and, furthermore, are going to do so." "What do you mean?" retorted Eleanor, her eyes flashing. "Just this," replied Julia. "Last year, the girls belonging to the present senior and junior classes met on this very spot and amicably disposed of a 2-year-old class grudge. Emblematic of this, they buried a hatchet, once occupying a humble though honorable position in the Crosby family, but cheerfully sacrificed for the good of the cause. Yesterday," continued Julia, "I overheard 2 juniors plotting to get possession of the same hatchet for the purpose of flaunting it in the faces of the seniors at the opening basketball game. Therefore, I decided to take a hand in things, and here I am, backed by girls from both classes who are of the self-same mind." "Really, Miss Crosby," said Edna Wright, "you are very amusing." "My friends all think so," returned Julia sweetly. "But never mind now about my amusing qualities, Edna. Let's talk about the present situation." She looked at Edna with the old-time aggravating smile that it was always warranted to further incense her opponent. It had its desired effect, for Edna fairly bristled with indignation and was about to make a furious reply when she was pushed aside by Eleanor, who said loftily, "Allow me to talk to this person, Edna." "No," said Julia resolutely, every vestige of a smile leaving her face at Eleanor's words. "It would be useless for you to attempt to be spokesman in this matter, because you are a new girl in high school and know nothing of past class matters except from hearsay. But you have with you 7 girls who do know all about the enmity that was buried here last spring, and who ought to have enough good sense to know that this afternoon's performance is liable to bring it to life again. If you girls carry this hatchet to school and exhibit it to the seniors on the day of the game, you are apt to start bad feeling all over again," she said, turning to the others. "There are sure to be some girls in the senior class who would resent it. Neither class has played tricks on the other since peace was declared, and we don't want to begin now. That's the reason I asked Grace to appoint a committee of juniors and come out here with me. I feel sure that under the circumstances, the absent members of both classes would agree with us if they were present. Digging up a rusty old hatchet is nothing, but digging up a rusty old grudge is quite another matter. We didn't come here to quarrel, but I appeal to you, as members of the junior class, to think before you do something that is bound to cause us all annoyance and perhaps unhappiness." There was complete silence after Julia finished speaking. What she had said evidently impressed them. Eleanor alone looked belligerent. "Perhaps we'd better let the old hatchet alone," Daisy Culver said sullenly. "The fun is all spoiled now, and everyone will know about it before school begins tomorrow." Daisy, how can you say so? Exclaimed Grace, who, fearing a scene with Eleanor, had hitherto remained silent. You know perfectly well that none of us will say anything about it. Why, we came out here simply to try to prevent your doing something that might stir up trouble again between the senior and junior classes. There isn't a girl here who would be so contemptible as to tell anyone outside about what has happened today. This was Eleanor's opportunity. Turning furiously on Grace, her eyes flashing, she exclaimed, "Yes, there is one girl who would tell anything, and that girl is you. You pretend to be honorable and high-principled, but you are nothing but a hypocrite and a sneak. I would not trust you as far as I could see you. I have no doubt Miss Crosby obtained her information about this affair today from you, and that everyone in school will hear it from the same source. You seem determined to meddle with matters that do not concern you, and I warn you that if you do not change your tactics, you may regret it. You seem to think yourself the idol of your class, but there are some of the girls who are too clever to be deceived. They do not belong among the number who trail tamely after you either. And now I wish to say that I despise you and all your friends, and wish never to speak to any of you again. Come on, girls," she said, turning to the members of her party, who had listened in silent amazement to her attack upon Grace. "Let us go. Let them keep their trumpery hatchet." With these words, she turned and stalked across the field to the road, where her runabout stood. After an instant's hesitation, she was followed by Edna, Daisy Culver, and those who had come with her. Henceforth, there would again be two distinct factions in the junior class. "Good gracious!" exclaimed Julia Crosby. "Talk about your human whirlwinds! What on earth did you ever do to her, Grace?" But Grace could not answer. She was winking hard to keep back the tears. Twice she attempted to speak and failed. "Never mind her, dear," said Julia, slipping her arm about Grace, while the other girls gathered round with many expressions of displeasure at Eleanor's cruel speech. "I can't help feeling badly," said Grace with a sob. "She said such dreadful things." No one who knows you would believe them," replied Julia. "By the way, who is she? I know her name is Seville and that she's a recent arrival in Oakdale, but considering the plain and uncomplimentary manner in which she addressed you, you must have seriously offended her ladyship." "I'll tell you about her as we walk along," replied Grace, wiping her eyes and smiling a little. "Yes, we had better be moving," said Julia. "The battle is over. No one has been killed, and only one wounded. Nevertheless, the enemy has retired in confusion." And that is the end of Chapter 10 of Grace Harlowe's junior year at high school. Thank you for listening to this chapter with me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!